Hello television amigo, hi Def, hi Cinco. Coming up this week on Video Game Nation, I'll be having the time of my death with Grim Fandango Remastered.
But here, have this complimentary mug.
I'm joined by Revolution Software's Charles Cecil for a nice cuppa and a chat about Broken Sword.
I hunt down my favourite gaming re-releases, remakes, remasters, or whatever you want to call them.
And of course our panel of industry experts will shoot opinions out of their pretty mouths.
Take on the world.
All that right here on Video Game Nation.
Tell Don not to worry. I'm not going anywhere.
Film noir, the black and white movie genre where death is king, femmes are fatale, and morality is just a mysterious smear on the pavement. Originally popular in the 1940s and 50s, noir's influence on games refuses to die. From the self-loathing monologues of cigarette sucker Max Payne, the high ceilings and low morals of the Arkham series, as well as, well, LA Noire, that's why it's called that. Wherever there's good people trying to live their lives in the big city, noir is right behind them, usually with a rope, a knife, and a convincing alibi. Grim Fandango is one of the world's greatest noir-inspired video games, and absolutely the best anything about being the Grim Reaper when the Grim Reaper is a down-at-heel travel agent stuck in an afterlife patterned on the Mexican Day of the Dead. Your boy, Manny Calavera, just wants to harvest souls and make it to the ninth underworld, but like all good noir heroes, he's sucked into a spiralling mystery, which in his case involves a winsome dame, a fat skeleton and a fez, and a deranged mechanic who's orange and weighs 10 tons. Fed on cinematic tradition and Aztec folklore, Grim Fandango has aged into a piece of vintage media itself, a 1998 Game of the Year winner that's been re-released with remastered graphics and a re-recorded score. It is the final remains of LucasArts' hugely missed point-and-click adventure games. But have the bones been picked clean, or is there still the occasional maggot? One of the first things you see in the re-release is the warning, this game does not save automatically, which is a red-hot blast of nostalgia for anyone who remembers the good old days before games held your hand, and in fact nobody would hold your hand, it was illegal at the time. No autosave isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you're out of practice at saving manually, welcome to the purgatory of the point-and-click adventure. Grim Fandango is the second to last LucasArts adventure game, which means its developers prided itself on the player rarely, if ever, dying or becoming stuck in a way that the game couldn't be finished. The trouble is, you take an old game, whack in a few control tweaks, and then release it on systems it wasn't designed for, and even the bugs are going to feel retro. I had a hell of a time on my PS Vita. Manny would get out of his car, walk in a little circle, and then just nothing. Just get stuck there. So I'd have to restart and go back to my last save. But hang on. I'm out of practice manually saving. This is from miles before. I've lost a ton of progress. Ah! Being responsible for your own saves? Oh, it's just as annoying as it was in the 90s. It's not a major gripe, but in a world as engrossing as Grim Fandango's, with a game style that's so stately in its pacing, getting stopped by a glitchy animation can really take you out of the experience. For me, what keeps Grim Fandango fresh after all these years is the wit. It's screamingly funny, and so it should be. It was written by Tim Schafer, who also wrote Psychonauts, the game about a summer camp for psychics, and Brutal Legend, where a heavy metal roadie is a rock god and not just a receptacle for fleas and groupies the band didn't feel like. This brings us to the famous LucasArts dialogue trees. Each character you meet has oodles of personality, which you'll find out in conversations that zing as sharp as the innuendo 1940s noir used to sneak past the censors. Nothing builds a situation faster than losing a funny war of words with your more successful bully co-worker. I've literally never been happier to feel like a complete loser.
I want to punch you in the mouth.
Oh no, not the Christmas party all over again.
The dialogue hasn't changed in 17 years. So what's new? The soundtrack is gorgeous, a jazz and orchestral score that's been re-recorded by the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. Characters have been reshadowed and smoothed, and on the PS Vita the control scheme's been altered, letting you navigate the lush afterlife with the touchscreen, which is nice even if the run function is a bit unreliable. The game actually plays best with a joypad. Ignore the touchscreen functionality and just use the buttons. The inventory and the items of interest systems are so well done that you won't be affected by any of the problems that used to affect ported point-and-click adventure games. You know, like the inability to point or click. And if Manny's Quest for Heaven is back on the market, what other games from the LucasArts canon would it be grand to see re-released? Here's the panel.
I think
all of the LucasArts games need to be brought back to HD. But I guess if there was just one series you'd pick, it would be Manic Mansion and Day of the Tentacle. I mean, those are so good, and they really set the entire bar for what you expect, not just from LucasArts point-and-click games, but point-and-click games in general.
I'm most annoyed that like LucasArts have never got round to actually doing the hologram chess from Star Wars. Like that's an obvious thing, isn't it? That's the game everyone really wants to play. Why, get on with that. What are you doing? You know, pull your finger out.
Don't you know how dangerous these can be? Oh dear.
The LucasArts game I would like to see brought back is Labyrinth, which was one of the first LucasArts adventure games. It was before the classic Maniac Mansion.
It's a game version of the fantastic David Bowie film. And I think any video game with David Bowie in it is just a good idea.
Funny, engrossing, well-designed and still interesting after 17 years, Grim Fandango is slow-paced, surprisingly addictive, and comes with a pretty damn fine director's commentary if the story, setting and gameplay weren't enough for you. The graphical update isn't worth it on PS4, so pick it up on handheld and you'll have a great time. Just remember to breathe during some puzzles and save. Less gritty than a reboot, less burned than a rehash, less gutsy than regurgitation. Here's Aoife with her top 5 gaming re-releases.
Confession, I never played Grim Fandango the first time around, so this remaster is the perfect excuse to find out what I've been missing out on all these years and to patch a pretty shameful gap in my games collection.
Now, the first year or so of a console's release is generally devoid of exciting new titles, and this latest generation seems to be going through a drier patch than most. Perhaps that's why we're seeing so many HD remasters popping up across every platform.
How do you tell a loving re-release of a classic from a shameless cash grab on the part of publishers that seeks only to prey on your nostalgia? Well, here are 5 relatively recent re-releases that do their originals proud. It's certainly a big deal to some this generation, but personally, I don't really care for a 1080p resolution. At least, it's not a deal breaker when it comes to deciding whether I'll play a game or not. And sometimes, when you're re-releasing a fairly old game, updating the graphics can actually rob it of its atmosphere, as was the case with Team Ico's PS3 remaster of Shadow of the Colossus.
And when you have a game with strong, simple art direction like Clover Studios' Okami, high-definition graphics seem even more superfluous. So why put Okami into this list? Because though the game has always been a critical darling, its initial releases on the PS2 and on the Wii suffered from poor visibility and thus poor sales. The HD re-release on PS3 gave the game renewed and much-deserved exposure to those that missed it the first time around, and ensured that although her developer had already gone to the big dog kennel in the sky, Amaterasu's legacy would live on in our hearts.
There is something oh so satisfying about seeing how far an entire industry has come with just one tap of a button.
Instant toggling between original graphics and their remastered versions is now a staple feature of many remakes, but Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary was one of the first titles to do it, and it actually started life as a tool to help the game's developers before being implemented as a feature in the final game. Of course, Halo Anniversary has already been remade as part of the Halo The Master Chief Collection, which launched on the Xbox One at the end of last year.
It brought the old-school Halo multiplayer experience to a brand new platform. Or it would have if the matchmaking hadn't been so broken upon release, prompting new developer 343 Industries to apologise profusely for the screw-up. That's alright guys, just make sure history doesn't repeat itself. Again. The bad part. Nah, you know what I mean.
Yep, it's a remastered re-release of a remake. Whew. The action-heavy Resi franchise of today is almost completely unrecognisable from the survival horror-focused titles of old. But thankfully, Resident Evil HD, which upgrades the graphics of the GameCube remake of the PS1 original, shows its contemporaries how atmosphere can take precedent over big shooty guns and squelchy bad guys.
This is a faithful remake that invites in new fans while reminding us old STARS members exactly why we fell for Resi in the first place. Sadly though, you won't find the cringeworthy dialogue of the PS1 original here, so no Jill sandwiches. Shame. When you take a beloved game, perhaps one of the most loved games of all time and decide to remake it, you're playing a dangerous game with fans. Expectations will be high, and people really don't like it when you mess with their most treasured gaming memories. How do you improve on a classic without tinkering with what made it really great?
Luckily, Nintendo pretty much nailed it with The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time 3D. From the moment Link wakes up in his treehouse in Kokiri Forest, you know this is a game made with great love and attention paid to the original. The changes in controls and dungeon layouts eradicated a lot of the minor annoyances the original suffered from, while leaving the fun in, and the updated visuals stayed true to the source material. It served as a reminder of how revolutionary the original game was for its time, endearing its quirky cast of characters to a new generation. Play it again, Link.
It may not have found its way into the hearts and minds of gamers like other titles on this list, but GTA 5 for PS4, Xbox One and PC is a masterclass in remakes done right.
You would have thought that given the sheer size of its original release and the fact that it squeezed every last drop of processing power from last-gen consoles, there was simply nothing left to add to GTA 5 when the time came for its inevitable next-gen port, barely more than a year after its initial launch. But developer Rockstar had other ideas, not least of which was a brand new first-person viewpoint that completely changed the way players approach the game. Then there was this super silly but fun new feature that allowed you to turn into various animals by eating peyote plants dotted around Los Santos. And then there were more minor but no less welcome additions, like updates to the radio stations that meant brand new DJ dialogue and brand new songs.
It's the kind of attention to detail that smaller studios probably couldn't justify, but it's fair to say that Rockstar probably had the time and the resources, and can now rest easy on a job well done, on big piles of money. Good job, guys.
Break time now. Don't book your trip to the 9th Underworld just yet. We'll be back in a minute.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
Brand new drama, Siberia, continues Sunday at 9, exclusive to Pick.
Welcome back. One thing I adore about point-and-click adventures is that they usually place you inside a fascinating world you'll really want to explore, but getting anything to happen is actually a massive accomplishment. Everything boils down to, I want to go here, you can't go here, it's on fire. Can I put out the fire? No, yes, wait, maybe. You've got a picture of your sister and the hoof of a shiny moose. Figure it out. That sort of thing. I mean, it doesn't matter what point-and-click adventure game you play. In the end, the enemies really are logic and your sense of patience.
What's the appeal of point-and-click adventures? Well, it's really a example of personality beating out everything else. Like point-and-click adventures, gameplay-wise, it's a big pain. They've never been really good at gameplay, but they are pure personality. You know, these are games that are funny and they're well-written and they're narrative-driven, and they've probably been written by Tim Schafer, and that's just a good thing.
Help! Police!
I think the mechanics of point-and-click games just allows designers and developers to create whatever kind of game they can imagine. It's like any story you can imagine, you can develop it as a point-and-click. Whereas things like first-person shooters, you're going to be constrained by the fact you have to be a man of the gun running around shooting things. So I think point-and-clicks just throw open the doors to creativity.
I realised as a gamer that I don't tend to do terribly well under pressure. Maybe a bit like life, I don't know. And point and click was this sort of very slow paced game where you were given all the time in the world. It's not like suddenly there's like a QTE event and you've got to do something really, really quickly. You know, you can just leisurely sort of amble through the game, figuring stuff out.
Take on the world.
I think part of the appeal of point-and-click games is that they just make you feel clever, don't they? You do feel smart when you solve that puzzle, and you know, and that's all fun. I think another big thing is there's such a good scope for humour in point-and-click games. You know, like the Escape from Monkey Island games. Of course, there is also a lot of scope for terrible humour. If you look at the Leisure Suit Larry games, which are basically just carry-on films in video game form without Kenneth Williams. I mean, that's nobody wants that.
My favourite point-and-click adventure ever has got to be The Secret of Monkey Island. I think any game which includes the line, "Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen," has got to be a classic.
Why, that's the second biggest monkey head I've ever seen.
My favourite point-and-click games are probably the Murder, She Wrote tie-in games, which are brilliant. They've all got like subtitles like "A deadly catch," and then there's like a picture of like a lobster holding a diamond necklace. Do you know what I mean? It's all like that. And you get to be Jessica Fletcher, like going around Cabot Cove and solving murders by clicking on stuff, which is brilliant. Obviously, that's a fun afternoon.
There was one called Sam and Max Hit the Road, which was based on a comic by a guy called Steve Purcell, I think, which was about this kind of crime-fighting, insane rabbit and dog private investigator. You know when you say video game things out loud and you think like, God, it sounds really weird to anyone who doesn't know this. Yeah, the dog who's like a private investigator. Obviously, stupid dog. Get back in your basket. You can't solve crime.
My favourite point-and-click has to be the original Monkey Island. Absolutely, the insult and comeback stuff on the sword fights was just fantastic. The number of times I must have replied, what was it? How appropriate, you fight like a cow. Just regardless of context, you just always pick that. And if you're watching this and you don't know what that means or why it's brilliant, then we can't really be friends.
How appropriate, you fight like a cow.
I think that with The Walking Dead, with Game of Thrones, with The Wolf Among Us, with Borderlands, Telltale have established that not only is the model of gameplay still really, really fun, entertaining, and viable commercially, but that it applies really well across all sorts of different stories and genres.
Aren't you the bold lord?
Well, I think this is sort of like the second golden age of point and click, really. I mean, obviously we did have that period of Grim Fandango and Broken Sword and games like that, which were huge and super popular. But now you think of games like The Walking Dead, Beyond Two Souls, The Wolf Among Us. Those games are huge now and so popular. And again, they are point and click. So I think it's so clever what Telltale have done. They have taken that genre, you know, spiced it up a bit, given it some nice graphics, and doing it episodical is very clever because it leaves you wanting more. It's perfect for that genre. So considering how popular these games are at the moment, I'd say we are in, you know, the second golden age of point and click now.
You're gonna get me! Come on, Aiden, help me!
Well, I think that nostalgia has a big market, and you're always going to have that. But yeah, we've seen such an evolution in what you can do with really simple gameplay and really big ideas in the narrative. And I think that's what Telltale's doing now. So that's really the next step, this episodic content.
If you're a fan of point-and-click adventures, it's likely that the name Revolution Software will hold a special significance to you.
Founded in 1990 by former members of text adventure specialist Arctic Software, Revolution quickly developed a reputation for producing adventures that rivaled big-budget efforts from the likes of LucasArts and Sierra for imagination, wit, and technical excellence.
After achieving critical and commercial success with its first two games, Lure of the Temptress and Beneath a Steel Sky, Revolution looked to the Legends of the Knights Templar for the game that would forever cement its status as masters of the genre, Broken Sword.
Revolution's virtual theatre game engine was among the first to feature non-player characters that would move around scenes independently, which sounds unremarkable now, but at the time it really breathed added life into the genre. Long before Assassin's Creed and the Da Vinci Code, Revolution had already introduced the world to American patent lawyer George Stobart and French journalist Nicole Collard, an unlikely duo attempting to unravel a conspiracy linked to the ancient and mysterious Christian organisation.
Broken Sword has since spawned 4 sequels, the last of which, The Serpent's Curse, was funded via Kickstarter to the tune of £500,000.
One man who has been part of the series since its inception is Revolution co-founder Charles Cecil, so I invited him to join me for a cup of tea and a chat shortly before the company's 25th anniversary.
Charles, thank you very much for joining me for a quick cuppa.
It's a pleasure, Dan.
My first question is, what was it that you saw or read about the Knights Templar that inspired the Broken Sword story?
I feel very fortunate when, to come across the Knights Templar when we did. And in many ways, we were part of creating that zeitgeist, which then my friend Dan Brown jumped on and took forward, and you know, bless him.
The bandwagon, just jump on it, and kicked you off it and rode away.
Yeah, well, indeed. With that magnificent book, The Da Vinci Code. Our fans are absolutely sure that Dan Brown must have played Broken Sword because of the similarities between Broken Sword and The Da Vinci Code. And if he did, then great.
Obviously, Broken Sword has now endured into its 19th year, I believe, in 2015. So what do you think is the secret of its appeal, that kind of long-term appeal that so many games kind of struggle to keep hold of?
Well, I think the fact it's 2D and the fact that it's very story-based. We were very careful to create characters that we thought would have the longevity and would be enduring rather than of the moment. And you know, one of the reasons that Broken Sword is as successful is because of the wonderful artwork. A lot of people talk about that opening Paris scene, which was very much his artwork, Rolf Saxon's George voiceover, and the haunting music of Barrington Phelan. We were very lucky.
It's such an iconic scene, isn't it?
Yeah, we were very lucky to have all of these people come together.
Brilliant.
Little did I know my reverie was about to be so rudely interrupted.
Obviously, the two things I have enjoyed throughout the Broken Sword series are George and Nico. Have you tried to keep the voice actors the same throughout the games as well?
We've always had the same George, Rolf Saxon, who's wonderful. Rolf will always, I'll meet him a day or so beforehand and take him through the story, take him through the scripts. Well, I'll send him the story all the way through. And because he knows the character so well, he will come back and he'll comment on the relationship with Nico, he'll comment on other things, which is great because when we go into the studio, he knows the story inside out. He obviously knows his lines inside out, and he'll carry the other actors because if they're not quite sure what's going on, he'll just know the context, and that's hugely valuable.
Now, the most recent game only came out last year. It was a two-parter, and it was also kickstarted to the tune of £500,000 from fans of the game. So why was the decision made to go with that instead of going through the publisher model?
What was fantastic with Kickstarter was to be able to engage directly with our audience and find out what people wanted. And we launched the Kickstarter with a video that attempted to convey the kind of messages about what the game was going to be. And immediately a lot of people got very excited, which is wonderful. But they also gave us feedback. So, for example, a few people said that George's chin was slightly wrong. And I went back to the artist and he said, I read that and I've already changed it, and what do you think of this? And he'd remodeled it, so we put it straight out. And people were thrilled that we were listening to them. But from our perspective, we were thrilled that people cared enough to actually give us feedback.
That begs the question then what's the future for Revolution and Charles Cecil? I mean, you've been synonymous with Broken Sword, I guess, for as long as it's been out now. Do you think it's now time for you to kind of pursue new ideas, new IP?
Absolutely, but not to abandon Broken Sword. I mean, we get the most wonderful messages from people, emails and letters. There's clearly a lot of passion. If Broken Sword 5 Kickstarter had failed, then we wouldn't have written another Broken Sword because it would have shown, well, first of all, we wouldn't have been able to afford to, but secondly, it would have also shown that it had run its course. So many new people are coming in and discovering adventures. The whole indie scene is and adventures really are part of the indie scene. They're not mainstream at all. People are discovering the indie scene, and it's great for us, and it's great for anybody who wants to write a game without a huge budget. Now, I'd love to do another Broken Sword, and I have some really nice ideas. Well, I think they're nice. I hope other people will think they're nice. Sorry, that's a very arrogant thing to say. I think that they're nice, and I'm excited by them.
Okay. Well, we'll watch this space is basically it then. So don't let your tea go cold, but thank you very, very much, Charles.
Pleasure.
Cheers.
Thank you, Dan.
Cheers.
Nico and I were about to be drawn into a new and terrifying adventure together.
That's it for this week, gang. Know a re-release you'd like to see, a point and click you adored, or maybe you wonder, what's the point of games like this in the modern era? Tweet at us at #VGN or drop us a like on the Video Game Nation Facebook page. See ya.
Shirley Bassey, Nat King Cole, Dusty Springfield were never on Stars in Their Eyes, but by heck did we have the next best thing. Classic episodes, Saturdays at 9 on Challenge.
Hey!